Hi, folks. Thank you. I'm here to talk about magic, magic boxes, and testing with magic boxes because that's where AI is heading. So if we want to be ready for AI, if we want to understand how AI relates to responsible software testing, I think we need to look way in the future, which is either next year or 20 years from now or 50 years from now, and think what is AI going to become? It's going to get better and better. It's going to get more and more context available. Maybe. I think it'll also get more and more expensive. I think companies will start raising their prices and it won't be free all the time. And but it's probably going to get better. So if it did get better, how would we relate to it as testers? To let it help us test. That's why I'm talking about how to use a magic box. So let's get into it. This is what I feel today when I encounter chat GPT type things, LLMs, Gen AI. I either feel like I'm dealing with a crazy dog that doesn't go in the right places in the agility course, or I feel like I'm the guy trying to make his Rube Goldberg machine work and it keeps going wrong and he keeps having to fix it. And you see, it's the human doing everything. The human is keeping everything under control as best they can. And that's how I feel when I use AI today. But perhaps when it gets really good, it'll be like a magic testing box, and you will bring your product to the magic testing box and say, "Oh, magic testing box, please find bugs in my product." How can we use that responsibly? That's the idea. So, in our upcoming book, the book called Taking Testing Seriously, which Michael Bolton and I, and Michael's here as well, we wrote this book. Took us several years to write this book. In our book, we have a chapter on AI, and we talk about magic boxes. And here's our definition of a magic box: any tool to the degree that its nature or behavior is neither controlled nor understood nor otherwise known to be safe. So if somebody gives you a tool, you don't know how it works, you're not quite sure what it does, except it's supposed to do good things, and you aren't sure that it's safe to use, that's what we mean by a magic box. Now, immediately you should be thinking, wait a minute, aren't humans magic boxes? And the answer, of course, is yes. If this is why you interview people before you hire them. You don't just hire people and say, "Oh, you just showed up. We're going to pay you now and you can work for us." "Oh, thank you." You interview them. And in fact, sometimes the interview process is very grueling for humans. And this is because we don't know that strangers that come to job interviews are necessarily safe for us to hire. Even if we believe they're safe, well, we don't necessarily know how they work. I don't know everything that Michael Bolton knows or that Sophie knows. I don't know what's in Sophie's head and how she works. I have an idea, but a lot of what my fellow humans do is not under my control and is not something I understand. But I feel safe around humans. Why do I feel safe around humans? Because of the legal system. Because society creates an environment where I don't have to be frightened all the time that somebody I'm working with is going to steal all my stuff or hit me with a rock or do something else that's scary. I feel safe around my coworkers. We know how to create relationships with other humans. The problem with AI is we don't have that. AI doesn't, I can't sue AI. I can't punish AI. AI isn't worried that it's going to lose its job. So it does, the same kind of guardrails that we have for humans do not exist for AI. That makes AI something which is not otherwise known to be safe, unless, of course, we get a lot of experience with it and people test it, and then maybe we can start to feel justifiably safe around it. Here are 3 heuristics for working with a magic box. If something matters very much, do not rely on magic to obtain it. When anthropologists study cultures that rely on magic to do things, that use a lot of magic, magical charms, magical songs, they find even in those cultures, these people don't just do their magic spells and then just stop and wait for stuff to happen. They also are good at their jobs. They practice their craftsmanship to build the canoes so that the canoes will float. And yeah, they say magical incantations over them, but they also are very good at making canoes. And that's probably why the canoe floats so well. They don't rely on magic, even though some of these cultures use magic and invoke magic. They don't rely on it. If something matters very much, but you have no other way to get it, you might as well try magic. And this explains, lucky charms that people carry with them in dangerous situations. And that makes sense. You're going on to the ocean in a rickety old fishing boat, and you take your lucky totem that your mother gave you, and well, you might as well. It's dangerous. And you might as well have all the help you can get. But if something matters very much, and you use magic, like magic testing boxes to test it, then you have to test that box. You have to look carefully at the results. You have to review what happens and take responsibility for it. So I don't mind using AI in my testing, except that I am going to be very careful how I use it so that I can take full responsibility for the work. I'm not just going to take stuff from AI and throw it out and say, there you go. I guess AI gave it to me and tells me that these are the test cases, so it must be right. We have to use this stuff responsibly. So I made this little picture here. I'm going to build it up for you. Here, let's do this. I have a little application. I'm going to zoom into this stuff. Okay, I'll do this step by step. So the considerations when you're working with a magic box for whether you should use the magic box fundamentally has to do with value. So let's say you have a magic testing box that can find bugs automatically, and you don't need to be a tester. You just have to push the buttons on the magic box to tell it to go, and then it's going to find bugs. Well, if it can find problems, and if the problems it finds are real problems, and if the real problems it finds are not easy to find, because if they were easy to find, you wouldn't need a magic box. And if those problems are difficult to find and they're important, they're good bugs, and it can find all the different kinds of important elusive bugs that are real problems. That's what we want. That would be the most fantastic magic box if it can find all that stuff. However, it may also find things that are not problems. And some of those things that are not problems might require you to investigate them, and that's just going to waste your time. So we want the magic box to find real problems and to do that reliably. We don't want it to be unreliable. We don't want it to find obvious and trivial problems because we can find those without a magic box. We don't need magic boxes to find obvious bugs. Any user, any junior tester, anybody can find those. They're right there to be seen. It might also fail to find a problem that it should have found. Maybe it finds it but reports it badly. Maybe it finds it but it didn't report it. Maybe it should have found it but it didn't. So we're hoping for this pathway right here, but to some degree, we're going to get this other stuff that we don't want. There may be other benefits. If you use a magic box, it might displace blame if anything goes wrong, because maybe you can blame the AI. Oh, the AI was supposed to do this and it didn't. It's not my fault. Personally, I don't think I'll be able to displace any blame to AI, but if I could, and if I wanted to, that could be a benefit. You could hide behind the magic box. I personally don't like doing stuff like that. If you're using a magic box that has a really good reputation, like maybe there's a test tool, there will become a test tool that uses AI that the testing community will use and decide this is pretty good for finding these kinds of bugs and everybody should be using it. Well, then that if you are known to be using that, well, that's another benefit. Okay. And the next thing is cost. So there's cost. There's the direct cost of paying to use this thing. And one of the things I'm worried about is people will get used to using AI while it's cheap, and then the price goes up on it, and suddenly your management doesn't want you to use it so much because it is so expensive. Right now, it's pretty inexpensive. But there's lots of indirect costs. You have to learn how to use it. You have to get it properly set up. And then, of course, there's the cost of just operating it, which even if it doesn't cost you money, it costs you time and trouble. And then you have to study the results, study the outcome, and maintain this stuff that it produces. Now, one of the things that is going to happen is management is going to say, let's use this AI tool because it will be productive. It will be faster. So, okay, so you use it. But then let's say you want to use it responsibly. So you look very carefully at the results that you get. But then that takes time. And if that takes time, management says, why are you spending the time doing that? Because now we're not saving time by using AI. Now we're taking more time than if you just did it yourself. So this is what I call the productivity paradox of AI, which is it's supposed to save us time, but when we use it responsibly, it takes us more time to check the work. And then management is going to put pressure on us to use the tools irresponsibly, to use them in a quick and dirty way. And that puts us at risk as testers because it's our reputation. Ultimately, they got to blame a human if the AI testing doesn't work out. They're going to blame a person for that at some point. They can't blame the tool ultimately because the tool doesn't care. So I'm concerned about that. Okay, what else do we have? And finally, there's risk. So we have the costs of the tool, the value of the tool, but you also have to consider the various risks of using the tool. And there are a number of them. One of them that's very important is alienation from work. What that means is if you use an AI tool to create test cases, to create automation for you, then you won't understand those test cases and you won't understand that automation unless you study it carefully. But the fact that it's not your work, it's somebody else's work, means that you won't have that same kind of deep knowledge and deep ownership of the results that you would otherwise have. In other words, the AI will do the work and you will probably feel like you're just some kind of secretary pressing buttons, filing paperwork, that you're not important, that you're expendable. That's what you'll feel. And the problem is that you really will be expendable if all you're doing is asking AI to do your work. So this alienates you from the work. It pushes you to an outsider status in your own job. Related to that is people discounting your work. Because if other people know that you use AI to do your work, why should they think that they need you? Why should they think that you are a skilled, capable engineer? After all, AI did it. So when somebody tells me that they used AI to write a report, I don't take that report very seriously. Why should I carefully read this report that they did not carefully write? I'm just going to find problems in it. And then if I complain to them, they'll shrug and say, well, the AI did that. And so why am I checking the AI's work? It's not even my own work. So when I know that somebody is using AI, I automatically become biased against what they're doing. And I know that I'm not the only one who feels this way. I'm sure that everybody feels this way to some degree. It's just like if you receive a spam email, you don't read it carefully. You don't treat every spam email as if it was carefully written by a stranger who wanted to connect with you. You know it's just mass produced. You know that you're one of millions of people who have gotten this email. This didn't mean anything to the person who sent it. Why should it mean anything to you? Just delete it. That's what I worry is going to happen with AI, is people just won't take the work seriously if they know that AI is involved. So that's why it's very, very important to protect your reputation when you are using AI. Otherwise, you will be working yourself out of a job. You'll be convincing your management that it's not you, it's the AI that's doing all the work. So why do they need you? So whether you should use a particular magic box or not depends on whether the good things about it are good enough to offset the bad things. So here the pink represents risk, or it represents cost, or it represents a failed benefit, and the green represents the good stuff that we want to get from AI. If the green is really, really green, well, then that offsets the pink, and I feel like this is a tool that's worth using. But maybe the pink is brighter than the green, and it's really not worth using. So this is the kind of thought process that I go through when I'm considering using an AI-based tool. Okay, did that already. Now, Yesterday, I was asked by the people at a company called QA Sphere to look at their product. And I looked at some documentation. I looked at a tool. Then yesterday, I had a wonderful conversation with them. I think they were nice people. And I think they were soliciting criticism, which I respect them for. And so I think these guys are headed in a good direction. But I do have a concern about this tool. So this is their QA Sphere test case management tool. And I just want you to watch what this guy says in 20 seconds. He's going to talk about AI creating test cases automatically.
Select Write Test Cases with AI to activate the bulk generation feature. With this, QA Sphere's AI starts to analyze the requirements provided and generate multiple structured test cases covering all functional aspects. This approach significantly improves test coverage, reduces the possibility of gaps in your testing strategy, and eliminates repetitive documentation tasks, allowing QA engineers to focus on more sophisticated system-level analysis and strategic quality assurance.
Yeah, maybe it does. Or maybe it's a big pain in the neck. I don't know. But what I would have to do is I'm going to have to study all of these test cases to understand what's really in them. I'm looking at the specification that they fed this thing, and they barely told this product anything about their product. These are just one-liners. It says, well, look what it says. It's like loading indicators and progress bars. Okay, so it has loading indicators. Success confirmation. This is supposed to be their spec. It's hardly saying anything about the product. But instead of asking questions to find out what this product really does, the AI just dumps a bunch of test cases. And I'm not sure what they are. There's labels here. So this is a magic box. I don't know how it works. I don't have control over it. And I don't otherwise know it to be safe. So I'm going to have to study the output of this to try to understand the coverage that I'm getting.
Select.
That's the challenge. So being careful with the magic box. This isn't getting into the essence of my talk. My talk is how to use a magic box. So how to use a magic box is, well, you've got to use it carefully. So how do you go about using it carefully? There's 4 big approaches to evaluation that Michael Bolton and I have identified. They go like this. 1, you can solicit social proof. Now, social proof may not be a term that you are familiar with, but it's a concept you are definitely familiar with. Social proof means that your social order, your society, your friends vouch for the product. So do I know that the Chrome web browser is good? Have I actually tested it? Have I ever talked to the testers of it? No, I haven't. Well, why do I use Chrome and not worry about it? Because I know that millions and millions of people are using Chrome. And if Chrome didn't work well, then that would be a big news story. So I probably don't need to worry about that. Chrome is covered in social proof. So is Google. Google is covered in social proof. I don't need to question Google very much. I'm going to do a search. I'm going to find stuff. I don't think a whole lot about what am I not finding, because Google has social proof surrounding it. So to achieve social proof, you've got to look at the reputation of the tool. Right now, Gen AI tools, ChatGPT, Claude, they have a pretty bad reputation. They have a reputation for making things up, for skipping things. Now that's going to change. It's already changed since the way it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It's already significantly better and more reliable in a lot of ways, ChatGPT, than the first time I looked at it. One of the first things I did with ChatGPT is I asked it about me, and I'm like, who is James Bach the tester? And it used to just make up a whole bunch of fake things about me. At one point, ChatGPT was sure that I had founded the ISTQB, which is interesting because that's an organization that I am adamantly opposed to. But it was sure that I was a founder, and it made up the titles of books that I supposedly wrote. But recently I asked ChatGPT who I am again, and it got everything right. It was 100% correct. So I think it's getting better, and maybe that reputation will improve. But right now, when it comes to social proof, there's not a lot of it out there to be had for AI-based test generation tools. I like this. Do it yourself and compare to AI. So what my personal preference is, I do my test analysis work myself, and then I ask AI to do the same thing, and I compare what the AI did to what I did, and I look to see if the AI has shown me any holes or mistakes or things that I've overlooked. So this is like the safety net approach. This is my crude drawing of a safety net. I'm not very good at drawing. That's a person on a tightrope walking along. So maybe that's me on my tightrope. It's nice to have a safety net. If you don't do the work yourself and then ask AI to comment on it or analyze it or to do it itself and compare, another thing that you can do is engage and review the AI output. And Michael and I have done a lot of this with AI output. And the number one rule that I would share with you is I always distrust the first impression that I get. Because the output always looks good when I first look at it. I ask for test cases. I get a whole bunch of test cases that at first glance look pretty good. I ask for a decision table. I get a decision table that looks handsome, nicely formatted, seems to have information in it. I have learned to distrust this first impression because every time I look more closely, I find problems with it. My method also is to start simple and ask it, instead of just giving it all the context and all the information and asking it to do something for me, I'll give it a small bit of that, and I'll ask it for test ideas or test strategy or something. And I see what it does when I don't give it very much information. I want to understand what assumptions it makes, because it will make a lot of assumptions. Gen AI tools tend to make a huge number of assumptions, and we need to be aware of those kinds of assumptions that it makes. So I like to start simple, and then later I'll add context as I understand more about how this tool is operating. I'm sensitive to whether it asks questions. Usually Gen AI does not ask questions. You can prompt it to ask you questions, but even if you do, it tends not to do anything with the answers that you give it, or it doesn't do very much with the answers. The most I've seen it is I'll say, hey, ask me questions about the testing, and it'll ask me questions, and I'll give it an answer. I might give it a bad answer, and it just says, okay, and accepts whatever bad answer I give it, and then it runs with that answer. A real good tester, of course, would stop and say, well, you didn't really answer the question. Michael and I also like to ask many times. We like to prompt it many times and see if it changes its answer. We like to compare the different sessions to see how its answers vary. Because sometimes it says, oh, yes, here's how you should test. And it'll tell you 5 things. And then you ask it again in a different session. And it says, oh, of course, here's how you test. And it gives you a different 5 things. One more thing. It is very common for Gen AI systems to give you an answer and give you a list of ideas, for instance. And then when you ask for more ideas or to take those ideas and put them in a different form, like in a JSON or in a CSV file, it often changes the list. It doesn't just put it in a different format. It takes some things off and it adds other things. So you have to watch out for it to drop or insert things into the test data or the test ideas that you're asking for. It's a very common problem. It's a very common problem in today's Gen AI. Maybe it'll be better in the future, but even when it gets better, it's still a magic box that you still need to test or supervise carefully in order to take responsibility for the work it does. So here's an example. I asked ChatGPT for a decision table. I gave it the source code to a JavaScript app for a US government website. Was not very long code. It was about a page and a half of code. And it had some complexity in it. And in just maybe 10 seconds, it produced this very nice looking table. Now, this is actually the second version of the table. The first version of the table, I saw obvious problems in it and asked it about it and then said, well, fix that problem and make me a better table. And so this is the second version of the table, which looked better than the first. But still, it took maybe 1 minute total to create this table. Now, this table walks through various variables that are involved here that are known to the user. And then you plug these things in, these conditions, and you'll get these results out here. That's what's supposed to happen. And even if I had more time, I'd show you the website and we'd go into details on it. But I don't have a lot of time. So, but if anyone wants to know what the website is and all the details that are behind this, I'm happy to show you. So then the thing is that I made my own table based on the source code. And it took me a couple of hours to make the table and to test the table and review the table and drive the errors out of the table. And as a result, I discovered that the table that I originally got from ChatGPT was about half wrong. So everything in red is wrong. You see where it says any here, an NAICS code. Here, I'll zoom in on this. NAICS code. Here it says you have to use an NAICS. You don't need to know what an NAICS code is. It's just it's a 6-digit number. That's the only thing you need to know. So this 6-digit number has to be 49110 for these test cases. But it can be anything for these test cases. But the fact is, it can't be anything. You have to use an NAICS code that is not 491110. But instead of saying not 491110, it just said any. So this is wrong. This is misleading. This isn't terribly wrong, but it is wrong. And so all of these that I've marked in red are incorrect. And then there's something weird happening here. You see how this says notes? Well, these aren't notes. These are extra test conditions. Why is it in a column called notes? It shouldn't be in this. These should be their own column in the table. But for some reason, it stuck it in here. So this is also confusing and incorrect. And then these are incorrect results. These were correct results. These are incorrect results. So it's not like it got it totally wrong, but half wrong is not right enough for me. I need better output than that. The problem is, of course, that when it takes 10 seconds to create something that's half right and 2 hours to create something that you're confident is fully correct, that's a big disparity. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on me as a tester not to spend that 2 hours, but instead people will say, oh, sure, it has problems, but it's probably pretty good. Maybe it's pretty good. I don't know. But I won't feel comfortable just using tables that I asked for from Gen AI tools until I go for a number of times where I've checked the table carefully and there haven't been any errors. So we're a long way from that. We're still 50% wrong here. Here's another example. Test cases from user stories. So I found a series of user stories online that you can find here. They're public user stories for a social media system. I fed these into ChatGPT, actually Bing, but Bing was using ChatGPT behind the scenes. I think it was ChatGPT 4.0. And I asked it for test cases. So this is what it looked like. So I said, create test cases for the social media system described by the following user story. I just pasted the user story in, and it gave me this stuff right away, like verify all these things. And then I said, what about negative cases? Because it didn't give me negative cases until I asked for them. This is an important issue with these tools, is sometimes you don't get stuff unless you explicitly ask for it. I would have liked to get negative cases without asking. So let's look at this data. This is the totality of everything that I got. Let's zoom in a little bit so you can read it. So these are the sorts of things. Verify that Eric can see Dora's photo posted from a recent event by scrolling through his feed and using a search function if available. See all these if available, if applicable? That's a problem, I think. Because as I analyze it, first let's dispense with a couple of things. I don't need all these verify that's. This is not giving me any information. And 2 of the so-called test cases are not even test cases. Like, look what this says. Verify that Eric can recognize Kathy in the photo. Wait, that's not testing the system. That's testing Eric. That's testing Eric's ability to recognize a friend. That's not a test of the system. Verify that Dora cannot correct Eric's person tab if she does not know the correct Cassie. What? This is about Dora's personal knowledge. Again, it's not really a test case. So I crossed that one out. The rest of them look like they might be test cases of some kind. But now we have a second problem. Everything marked in purple is where ChatGPT has made an assumption that a certain feature exists in the product that it has no reason to believe is in that product. And this is a lot of assumptions. Now, if the feature does happen to be in, that's fine, I guess. But if you were a tester and you're asking for test cases, and these test cases come back full of false assumptions about how the product works, you have to pick through that and get rid of that stuff. Those are not usable test cases. Then there were some parts in teal here, which all they were is reading back to me the contents of the user story. Well, that gives me no added value. I already have the user story. I don't need the test case to just restate the user story. Finally, there are these three orange ones where it seems to me ChatGPT has actually had an idea that's not a bad idea. So out of all these test cases, I see three that seem reasonable to me. That's how I analyze this. These are also quite vapid ideas. I mean, there's not much to them. Do I really need this? Why not? Why don't we just read the user story and then use the product? We don't even need test cases that look like this, it seems to me. Oh, and finally, if I'm going to make test cases out of these user stories, I'm not going to use people's names. So I guess I can go back and prompt it and tell it, don't use people's names, and just say user 1 and user 2 or something like that, because that's kind of weird to have a test case that talks about Eric and Dora. These people don't exist. They're just users of the product. So I think these results are not helpful. That's how I analyze it. Now, maybe you disagree and you think they're helpful. I'd like to hear your argument why you think that this is helpful when all we really needed to ever do was read the user story and use the product. And these test cases are not telling us anything that we don't already know. So I think this is bad testing. Dubious assumptions, no questions were asked. I also have no idea how these cases were arrived at. What was its method for generating these? So when we looked at the QA sphere test cases, for instance, it's the same thing. How do I know how those cases were created? Were enough of them created? Were too many created? Are they always, does it always create the same ones no matter what I do? I don't know what the method is. I don't even think the people who wrote the tool know what the method is. I think they just give a prompt to ChatGPT and ChatGPT dumps a bunch of stuff. But the problem with that is I have to figure out if I'm getting enough testing. And of course, my method is I plan the testing myself. I don't ask the magic box to do the testing for me. I don't mind using a magic box to check my work. That's okay with me. Go ahead and check my work. But doing it by itself and have me just sort of watching is, for me, that's not responsible enough. Also, these test cases included no oracles. It ignored related features. Of course, it made up a bunch of features, so maybe it tried to talk about related features, but it didn't have any information about it. I had to ask for negative test cases. It didn't give them to me unsolicited. What if I didn't know about negative test cases? What if I were not an expert software tester and I used this tool? I wouldn't know that I was being given bad work. Now, you could say that it wasn't fair for me to ask ChatGPT for test cases because a real human should have said no if you ask a real human for test cases, because the real human doesn't know enough about the product to make test cases. See, it's kind of a trick question. If somebody asks me to write test cases and I don't know enough about the product, I don't just create test cases. I say, no, I have to learn the product first. This is what I think a competent tester should do if asked the same question that I asked ChatGPT. I think a competent person would say, I'm not able to create test cases. It's not the right thing. You don't need me to do that. But what you do need me to do is do some analysis. So I made a mind map and I broke down the user story. Eric sees a photo posted by Dora from a recent event. Okay, I'm wondering how this system works. Under what circumstances can you see the photos from another user? Do you have to be friends with them? Does the photo have to be set to a public status? What if you're not logged in? Can you see it when you're not logged in, or is it only people who are logged in who can see it? So I've got a bunch of questions based on my background knowledge. I need to know the answers to this question before I can think of a good way to test this. Eric recognizes their mutual friend Cassie in the photo. Okay, there's nothing relevant to testing about that. I mean, I can't ask the question, well, how easy is it to recognize a friend in a photo? That's not part of the functionality of a system that has to do with the photo. So I've got no questions about that. That's just setting up the situation. Okay, so Eric tags Cassie in the photo with a specific location. All right, what are the different ways that we can do tagging? What happens if we tag something and it's not a face? So these are all these questions that occur to me. I would like an AI that when I ask it for test cases and it can't create test cases responsibly, it would go into this mode and say, how about if I find out more about how this system works so that I can advise you on a good way to test it? That's what I think a testing expert would do. That's what I would do anyway. And I'd like to see my magic boxes do stuff like that. We're not there yet with AI tools, but maybe someday we will be. And if we are there and we see reliably that these tools behave in a conservative, reasonable way, then I'll be using a lot more AI in my testing. That's for sure. All right, so that's my presentation. And I think I'm close to out of time. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe Shalom can help me with this.
Yeah, you still have about 15 more minutes.
Oh, all right. Okay. So I don't know if there's any facility for questions, but what I could do is I have some more material. I have some more examples that I'd like to show you that are in a different slide set. So I'm going to say,
yeah, that's fine. That's totally fine.
I'm going to load that up because I didn't think I would have time for all my examples. So I only put a couple of examples in. So I got some other examples. All right. Now, Michael and I have been doing some various experiments. Here we go. Hit this right there. There we go. And one of the experiments that we did was something simple with test data. We asked it to take a list of words and to turn it into a sorted list where there's a count of how many times that word appears. So this is a pretty simple task. It's very easy to do with a Python script. We asked ChatGPT to do it. And what we wanted to know is, can ChatGPT do this reliably? And the answer is no. But we did a systematic experiment. We started with this prompt. And it tried to give me a program to generate it. I said, no, I want you to do it. So I changed the prompt. And then it didn't sort the keys in the JSON. So I said, note that It's sorted alphabetically. And then finally I got a good result. All right, great. It did it. It did it correctly one time. But just the fact that it does it correctly one time, that doesn't mean it's going to be reliable. That's my point. I keep seeing people who say, oh, look what I did with AI. And the one example that they showed is pretty good. But I wonder, what if you did that 100 times? So I decided that I would do variations of this. I would add a little bit of extra emotionalness in it. I'd say, like, you are a meticulous data creation assistant. Accuracy is important. I don't like putting in these emotion statements. I don't think I should have to do that, but somebody said it would behave better if I did, so I tried it. I use different kinds of word lists. I use normal word lists, nonsense word lists, and URLs. I wanted to know if it would behave differently. Here are the results. I did each experiment 5 times, and then I did it for word lists that were, let me zoom in here, word lists that were as little as 4 words long and as long as 37 words long. Okay, and I did this on version 3.5 of ChatGPT with 3 different temperatures, and also in 4.0 of ChatGPT with 3 different temperatures. I have not tried it recently on any of the new models. I have to try this experiment again on the newest models from ChatGPT. But here's what I discovered when we did this this experiment the first time. To our surprise, 3.5 was more reliable than 4.0. I thought 4.0 would be more reliable. Not true. So we had reliable behavior up to a word list that was 24 words long. After that, we got reliable failures. And but it only was reliable up to word lists of 14 for 4.0. So that surprised me. But here, this also is interesting. The emotive prompt didn't make any difference for 3.5. It made a little difference for 4.0. I thought it wouldn't make a difference at all. So, but it made a little bit of difference. Nonsense words. Now, this really surprised me. For nonsense words, 4.0 performed much better than version 3.5. I wouldn't have thought there would be any difference, but somebody's told me that there might be a difference. And so I gave it a try, and sure enough, there's a big difference. For URLs, none of the models did very well. Only lists up to 10 were reliable. So what this is telling me, the big news here is you can't predict how well an LLM is going to handle this kind of task unless you do an actual experiment with the kinds of words and the kinds of situations that you're going to put it in. Because if you just try one kind of word list and it works, you don't know that if you change the words, it might do badly. This is not like other tools. So that's one. Now I'll give you another one. And this is a hopeful idea. Okay, I'll give you something where I think it did a good job. Okay, and this again is using this as a safety net. So this is a safe way to use a magic box. What I did is I took all those user stories. There's something like 93 user stories. And I put them all into ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT for each one of these to give me a list of testable elements. I didn't ask it for test cases. I asked it for testable elements. What are the things that are mentioned here that we can test? And then I added up all the results. That's what I did. This was my prompt. And I had to modify the prompt once to get it to do what I wanted it to do. So I basically said, your task is to identify and list every testable element of the software product that is stated or implied by this user story. You must present your output in JSON form without any commentary. Okay. So I got this. This is all the results that I got. Now, look, this is pretty good. The title of this is User Posts a Note. The body is Eric writes a short note, and after posting the notes, he notices a spelling error. He edits and reposts it. This is the user story, the original story. These are the testable elements that were identified. This looks pretty good, doesn't it? Note creation, note sharing, note editing, note reposting, note deletion. Yeah, that's pretty much the testable elements I would have thought. User is not really relevant, but I don't care about that. So I produced all these things, ran it through all these things, and then I added them all up at the end. And this is the full list of testable elements. And there's some junk on this list. But see, if you're using it as a safety net, it doesn't matter if there's junk on the list, because I'm not using this as test cases. I'm not using this as a replacement for myself as a tester. What I'm doing is I read these myself. I read the user stories, and then I analyze what I need to test. And then I run this process, which is really fast to run. And then I run my eye down here and I ask myself, is there anything on this list that's not on my other list? It's not in my analysis. And so maybe authentication isn't there. Now, asparagus cases, that has to do with somebody selling asparagus over social media. So that's not going to be a testable element. But asking for comments, maybe, or commenting feature, commenting on this stuff, this is good stuff. So I like this, and I want to develop this tool or this way of using AI. I think this could be useful for testers. So there you go. There's a couple of ideas for you, and I think there's one last thing on this slide set. Here it is, which is, if you're going to test AI, if you're going to test an AI test tool, or if you're going to test an AI system, then what makes AI hard to test? It's important to keep these things in mind. And Michael and I think there are 6 things that make AI hard to test. We don't know what the algorithm is, but neither does anybody else. Even the developer doesn't know what the algorithm is. We don't know how it actually produces its result. That makes it hard to test. Its output can change radically depending on small changes in inputs. Oh, that makes it very hard to test. Every time they change the tool, they change the model, you have to do all of your testing again, pretty much, because anything could have gotten messed up. It's much, what we call this, radical fragility. It's a much more serious situation than typical regression risk, because no developer has looked at a line of code and changed just that line of code. When you retrain a model and update a model, you don't know what's going to happen. Then we have wishful claims. If somebody says, oh, this tool thinks just like a real human tester. Well, how do you test that? How does a real human tester think? It's a poorly understood concept. So it's fundamentally hard to test magic boxes when the people who create them aren't even quite sure what they want them to do. And then there's the fact that they're socially intrusive. They try to talk to you in English and you're expected to treat them as if they were real people, which is awkward and difficult to. It's difficult to test something when part of testing it is you have to insult it and see how it deals with insults. That's got to be hard on testers. And finally, corporate defensiveness. It can be difficult to test AI when management doesn't want to hear about problems with AI because they just spent a lot of money on it and they just want you to accept it and use it. And they expect you to be successful with it, even if it's bad work. Okay, well, there, now I'm really done. I have extended my time by a little bit. And if anybody has questions or issues about this, feel free to contact me or Michael Bolton. We're both on LinkedIn. We're both easy to contact. We like to answer people when they ask us questions. And we both teach classes either online or in person. Michael is teaching some classes upcoming in Europe, and somebody has been talking to me about maybe me doing an online class that's meant especially for Africans, West Africans, but we're still working out the details of how I would do that. So I'm not sure when that's going to happen or if that's going to happen, but there has been interest. So there you go. And then we have a book coming out called Taking Testing Seriously, which I hope you check out. All right, Shalom. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot for that beautiful session. Certainly would be interested in knowing when you decide to take the class and when your book eventually gets published. I'd love to get a couple of it, right? So before you go, let's just see if we have anyone who might have questions they want to ask you directly. Yeah, I think we have a couple more minutes for that before we call it a day. So anyone with questions before James takes his leave? I mean, we have one more session, but then I want to give opportunity for people to ask questions. Anyone? Okay. I'm checking the chat box. I can't find any. Okay. All right. Great. Thanks a lot, James. We appreciate that. Could you please just share, let's leave emojis, let's leave chat box, let's leave reactions, let's let him know we appreciate him for that session. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to share with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks a lot, James.
My pleasure.
Okay.